Laura Moriarty has been a central figure in the Bay Area and broader Anglophone poetry communities for over 50 years. And her contribution to those communities as activist, organizer, fundraiser, and impresario, among her many roles, deserves the sort of recapitulation I don't have time for here. Instead, I begin this introduction by acknowledging her accomplishments in both shaping the contemporary community of writers and artists and defining the pathways that enable us to reach our varied goals, but assert that such achievements, though extraordinary in their own right, are dwarfed by her accomplishment as a poet, which is so expansive, so diverse in its foci and its modes of operation, that any attempt at a summary or description, any compendium, feels perfunctory. My solution in this radically delimited introduction is to emphasize a few of the inimitable constants that continue to make every new encounter with Laura's work a revelatory imperative. The always surprising but no less ineluctable propulsion of her conceptual engine, with the subtlety of her philosophical acumen as its through line, and the ecstatic complexity of her prosody and her lyrical refinement as its fuel. Throughout the scope of her brilliant production, across genres and leitmotifs, epistemologies and spells, she develops a voice at once intimate and procedural, ardent and analytical, frequently comic, and always alive to the social, political, philosophical, and personal pressures of time. What emerges is not simply a set of themes indefatigably coursing through the exhaustive particularities of her research and her insight, love, grief, catastrophe, oppression, ecology, to name a few, but a method, a kind of phenomenology of poetic discipline and craft, corralled by an insistence that poetry is a form of embodied research, a way of reading, thinking, walking, gathering, sorting, and reassembling the world. If this sounds as much like the practice of a sculptor or conceptual artist as it does a poet, that is no accident. Indeed, Laura's late expansion of her practice to include the plastic arts is an organic extension of her methods and her project, a further amplification of her visionary calculus, entirely coextensive with her work as a writer, corroborating with her interlocutors the disaster of our moment as the lived atmosphere, with attention as the only workable instrument, and practice as the ground of response. Thus, I end this brief encomium with a quote from Personal Volcano, where she writes, "Life and non-life are the objects interacting as they create the strata that will define our time, whether anyone is here to read it or not." Please welcome Laura Moriarty.
Thank you, Steve. I don't know how I can even possibly live up to that. I give it my shot, best shot. Let's see, how will I get over there?
Is it too glary?
The sun is
Nope,
good.
I can do it.
Yeah.
I have some books on the table in case people want to buy them, and if you don't have any money to buy them, then I'll give you one.
A born salesman.
So I've been reading from Witch Walks, which is a year old now, for a year, and I've read various parts of it to various folks here. And so today I'm just going to read a couple pieces from Witch Walks and then read from a new project. And I'm reading the kind of Irishy ones, and you'll see why later. And in these pieces, I'm partly thinking about this idea that if there's trauma in your family, like your ancestors, you somehow inherit it. You know, it's like in your genes in some way. Of course, we all have it, and so we all have that inheritance. Witchwalk 9, look-see time. No one speaks Martian. Jack Spicer, my vocabulary, did this to me. But us, whose rusted skies drift over volcanoes higher than earthly ones, but for the just born, sporting as they do, plant life, false starts, and parallax views forms when a chance phrase changes like a snake into a bird dreamt by the world, whose confluence of bodies of water as rivers with rivers, I with thee, birds with fruit with trees, who sing and say remembered phrases called courtly, meaning flutes, bells, books of kells, calls, cauldrons, coverings as chrysalides, enfolding living monarchs, whose commands are pronounced by today's trapes into the sun and shade of look-see place, including what is created by the panoply of responses whose instrumentation allows us to think through the catastrophes as of famine and dread, assimilated into a song inside a head, sustained by whistle and drum, where bones serve as flutes and bells as themselves, and all as the drone which hums. When we call each other Martians, we know what we mean, and for that moment what we want when we read the book, as if we'd both written the prophecy that exists in this transcription of buds and bugs blossoming as the field goes green, and those who know dream hot of the Martian cold, old, stint, brash, cast, dint of, exact. I'm going to read one of the poems of flying, Witchwalk 34, Witch Cruise. Oh, actually, no, I'm not going to read that. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to read this. Witchwalk 33. Gone because, quote, can for habit not of this, James Pennebaker, The Secret Life of Pronouns. When fly meant to flee from famine, arrest, war, or general cursedness of the local imperium's machinations, we did and do, ending up gone to a new but old hemisphere, not here, but back east or Midwest, in time to fight the Civil War on the Minnesota side, or to arrive in Providence as a freshly hitched orphan bride, whose names rhyme with the new time, and whose chair rocked as she drank while not failing to fall, rustling in her silk, doing or not what she was compelled to do while flying, not even trying to answer the question of what to have done not to die so young. As what can anyone do faced with the nothing of today's masked wandering against the world, despite being exactly like what of it there is or was, as flying is dying to be borne away with the function words we know, the pronouns we own. And now I'm going to read from World Events. I think this project is going to be called. It continues the witch walks. And this is Witch Walks 46, I'm calling it. It's really, I'm not reading all of it, but it's like, well, it's over 30 pages and will be the first part of that book once I put the book together. But you know, you have a book and you're putting it together and you call it this and you call it that and then you change it and well, you know, so who knows. Let's see, I was reading a lot of Leibniz, and there's a lot of symmetry and monads in it. I felt very called at a certain point by Persephone, and I thought, why am I being called by Persephone? She's the young one, I should be called by Demeter, but it was a Persephone thing. And Venus, I was kind of obsessed with Venus, and seeing Venus from the bed, the planet, and making a Venus, and pottery, and all things. And then Anna Weissman and I, who many of you know, and who's here, did a project where she hypnotized me, and then I tried to find some language from my collective unconscious, assuming I had one of those, and it did actually produce some language, and some of that appears. Even Venus disappears despite this interconnection means each simple substance has relations which express all the others, and that consequently it is a perpetual living mirror of the universe. Leibniz from the Monadology. Vade mecum, she dreaming declaims, come with me, with this, my index of age, rage, youth, simultaneity, as kinds of memory overpower these limits of proof whose earth both ways, Hecate heard what the sun saw, rooted in this public cult's confounded fusing, lacks material presence when Persephone appears in my mind as if she was hell and I was her bride, taken, given away while, quote, the efficacy of her anger, the reconciliation of her lost self, visible to one who watches objects in boxes, is carried by exposing a variable when, as claimed, Persephone's call seems strange until she pictures the mixing of goddesses. She draws them out as twins, triplets, multiples who morph into still more versions of themselves. They are characters, letters, lines, projects, excursions. She is them in one sense, and in another she is me, Mert, who moves with them to disappear into the everyday's chest of abrupt implements, baskets of breath, altered by experience, the virgin trail, Demeter's dream, Plutarch's soul at death wandering in circles, dark paths, danger to oneself, panic, shivering, sweat, amazement, perfect by now, freed to mix with the dead in the underworld of books. Quote, live in joy, die in hope. Cicero blossoms into afterlife's female world, agricultural year, sphere to sphere. She breaks out, penis cakes, pine cones, cunt cookies, and ritual abuse, water on the head like rain. The priestess whispered something secret into the ears of Omen, hiddenness, rites for the dead, pious and garlanded, the winter finches, the summer coming, a book in one hand, a torch in the other, screaming of the new world or simply speaking with Kore and her stand-ins, crowned, cracked, married off, temples found in forest. Demeter, disguised as old, sought refuge among men, wanders again, drinking wheat, mint, water, honey. When asphodel appears, they desire to become as true as the Morrigan, meaning raven, maiden, warrior, crone, a fleece-covered stone. Proserpina summons a conduit for her grief, jokes, potions, Demeter's haste along the trail for days of ergot enhanced dance, mother-in-law of the lord of the underworld, Persephone perplex, whose garlands, absolutions, haircutting, songs, fasting, and feasting change into both funeral and wedding as one equals the other. HD's poppy buds and Mert's weeds like wheat, so called by her first lover, who, being Californian, as herself by default, ending up here in bright Miltonic darkness, sheathed in sheaf or spike, the miniature field of corn growing at the studio door, women with baskets of the prize, apples of hell, seeds there, stored and stoked, painted plants invoked, watching planets through lenses, settling for the moon. The virgin trail is anything but. Hecate's nights write as fairy queen or trivia as was, whose three roads, hills, dogs, snakes, horses, not rising but left with pessimism, escape, always a new way to know, vexed questions of her attributes, conscious wisdom or autonomous thought, whose mirror of other winter goddesses, human times, double event deity, twinned in triplicate, wanted to and did, love again, lifted from lists, manuals of mythic or phenomenal time, incipient depression of spirits pours everything into everything else again as objects in boxes, The work itself, carried by Eleusinian assistants, is like a job she would have and maybe did or does with chastity, implements, improv. There is mourning and ecstasy in this experimental religion. The ritual comes when the dead join in. Hilaria is implicated. Habit in its ritual role obliterates the interval between thought and act. She remembers the future, replaces the past with action, vanishing yet again. Momentum is more useful than control, she transcribes, or later, let the room become a madhouse of puppets, as good a plan as any she thinks she knows. And it goes on for another 25 pages, but now we're at the actually first of the world. This book will be called, as I think probably I've said, World Events. And I was just think, well, world, you can spell world the various ways, so just to say. The world of gyrostatic events, Smithson, or gyrotundo, Joyce, whose expectations are evidence of maps that transmit, as do other indices whose intimate, ephemeral, and complex enactments comprise a terrain between the spiral as depth and surface, closeness and distance, turning and being still until a construction washes up on a beach and is found to be more advanced than what she thinks of as her coils, because it can float out to sea and remain intact, despite the fact that its base is a square of concrete blocks. Its scale is small, like that of the coils, and there are plants on it, perhaps seaweed and possibly a message, whose hermeneutics of suspicious energy include joy, newness, and the continuity of the pulsing blue dot representing her location, whose conceptual map of thought spirals as setting out each day and each day back and around, now falling, now flying in her mind, placing handmade shapes in prominent and or hidden locations, then taking them, as oneself is taken away, only to return, hoping to continue to be able to bend, walk, consider, make, and stay with this shaped notion whose form characterizes both what is uplifting and what damns us downward to a clear and present hell. We should never be, but are, threatened, awake, sleepless, watchful, and afraid of going or staying. As much of what is good circles the drain, but will we save ourselves by maintaining recognizable ways to prosper and sustain, while fomenting rebellion as active actors who, with our props, costumes, and resources, narrate the return whose, however, vicious circles suggest the pre- and post-history we've read so much about, as whirling wildly in place we know what to do and where to go, even as the unknown takes hold. Map practice. 1. A map is a trap, tool, plan, and thought animated into a flat machine, built to solve an infinite set of problems, proposed by Janus, fashioned by Minerva, and blessed by Bridget, whose folded omen of present time as X-ray, trace, and trance sweeps us up as glaciers face terminal decline, revealing the world to itself, which is not the territory, but its double, with its interstices of difference and real-time systems in full retreat, as finally and thankfully pickleweed reddens and yellows like leaves in the fall, or glasswort, as it's also called, becomes succulent, weedy, scaly, and salt-tolerant, transforming itself into beings, vigilant, loving allies, standing by us, luckless but dogged. As we from secret earthworks glean the kind of knowledge a map provides, with its trickery and surprise, which do not, like a forest of coils, overwhelm us with their turning, unfolding as they do beyond our eyes into a romance of entropy, not unlike when we recoil, wanting what we can hardly imagine, as silly as it is, and such fools as we are, but wanting it anyway. 2. Such are plans, she reflects, for work and for the battle against not working, which she loses occasionally, but not now, she resolves. Broadening while also narrowing her practice opens possibilities for housework, as she names the arrangements, figures, beings, drawings, and other excrescences of whatever this is she is doing. Its puppets are alive in her head, she muses. The puppet play is a score, the work a stage, she further asserts, thinking of the rolling cart that functions as archives, studio, storage, and display mechanism comprising the ways and means of each next world decision, eventuality, and event. Okay, this will be the last poem that I'm going to read, and then I'm going to do the puppet play. Origin story, divine semblance, the felt layers of which produce the same anxiety as objects whose affinities are affixed with heads, threads, bones, books of hours, hours themselves, badges, gems, metal, kettles, and rags, torn and displayed as a way of taking and being taken apart, then stitched up to create the negative space valued by diviners, whose machinations are the favorite part of the plot of what let's call social tonalism, as it replaces the speculative with the eccentric motifs imposed by each wave of change, where that means the dissonance of many brains downloaded from the wild by a planet-sized factory's newly taken space, whose outlines reprise the many worlds delusion that the prosodic beings possess agency, exuding a supernatural feel, as if these real dolls, robots, and actors, having mastered their fate and ours, find themselves caught among the seams and vortices at the core of my actual notebooks, ledgers, diaries, diagrams, designed, bound, annotated, drafted, and wrapped into key lines which cohere into vignettes determined by characters whose surfaces reflect the interiority of each being who, as they claim, are made of the same stuff as anyone, with horns, shells, balls, bells, and joints that signify action while reacting with world power, portending a view of the universe whose actual dissemblance produces yet another version of what life is like when we drink the ink of surmise, and that accelerant burns this history into something like personal belief, making movement out of alacrity, maneuver, and desperation, as when a new being alters the narrative, the prosodic becomes coded, rhetorical, and as filled with bombast as Chatty Cathy saying with her battery-driven voice, "Let's play house," making her more of a gender cop than a treasured imaginary companion, not unlike the full-size doll I thought would be that, but who sat on the pale green upholstered couch Christmas morning in the middle of the last century, her frightful size and sightless eyes more disturbing than the Twilight Zones I had learned not to watch, or the Outer Limits I also avoided, knowing Kathy's agenda was not my own. But what did she expect now that her own beings move, are moved, posed, seeming to see and say, not still but loud, busy, bold, old, white-haired, so tattered and flimsy they seem to dissolve as she watches them evolve into an army of thought that wants to be deployed, engaged, enraged, as we, they, I, merge and emerge, as if what we wanted was them, fast, cheap, and uncontrolled as the bots who surround us with their Ouija-like statements, blank faces, and endless hallucinations, fail to recognize that creation precedes citation, even as physical connection, bless its endangered heart, seeks to connect what is imitated with what is original, fake than real, profane than sacred, aiming to contain contagion with a proper name, an episodic mimesis whose divinatory readings reveal the future of today's last act as it collapses around us, while they, gracious, helpful, polite, just released, and completely mad, remain eager to be what we believe we want, even as we seem to dream we want it back. Okay. So the question is, can you do the puppet wearing all these bracelets? And the answer is yes, because I tried it before. Okay. How are you doing? Okay, okay. Breathe. Okay. That's good. That's good. Are you ready? Yeah, yeah. Okay. I would like to introduce my friend Agatha. I'm not a puppet. Okay, I never said you were. I'm more like a goddess or a corn dolly. What's a corn dolly? It's a plant creature that helps things grow. And it scares you. Okay, okay. Do you want to know what I am? No. But I want to know what they are. Okay, that's the audience. There's some musicians. Mostly they're poets. Jesus. There's an anthropologist. Thank Christ. Line.
Not exactly anthro.
Oh, yeah. You're not exactly anthro. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm not. I'm more like, I see myself as handheld time.
You're more like a chat.
Oh, yeah. It's lucky you have him. I know. I'm more like a chat than a statement. I'm a process. Gosh, I am too. I see myself as handheld time. No, the world personified. Huh, okay, that's good.
Obviously.
Obviously. Obviously. You know, we share a brain. Aye, but not a fate. Okay. Wait, you named me after your first dog. She was a good dog. Where's that anthropologist? Okay, what would you like to be called? I think Bridget, or maybe the Morgan, or maybe Athena, or Ahania. Yeah, Ahania is hot, and it suits me as a Blakean. So, you're a Blakean, but we don't share a thing. Exactly. Ahania, Ahania. I like it. Okay, friends, I would like to introduce Ahania, prosodic being and the world personified.